Living with my husband, Josh, is totally toxic. Our marriage is broken. We fight daily.
You would get in my face?
He's verbally and physically abusive toward me. He tells me I'm a bad mom and has wished me to have a miscarriage.
You don't scare me.
I'm the God.
We have 2 boys, they're 2 and 4, and I have an 18-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Right now, I'm 13 weeks pregnant with Josh's 3rd child. For some reason, Josh's violence increases when I'm pregnant. He's choked me, he's hit me, he's slapped me.
I can't go back and change what I did. I can only change what I do from now on.
You should see the behavior and say, me attacking my pregnant wife is not normal.
One time, Josh and I had an argument. I was holding my 2-year-old son. He grabbed him out of my arms, ran outside, so I went after him and Josh physically attacked me. Josh pulled my shirt over my head, exposed my breast. He punched me in my back and then drove off with our son. When the fighting gets really heated, Josh's bipolar disorder gets triggered. He loses control, becomes more violent.
Blaming bipolar is exactly what you do because you don't take the actions to fix that.
I want nothing more than to be a bipolar person that leads a normal life.
I'm starting to believe that a lot of his behavior is his own choices and not because of his disorder. 2 years ago, Josh and I were separated, and he went on to some hookup site and started chatting with some girl. She told him that she was 13, and they arranged to meet in a parking lot. The whole thing was a giant sting operation. He was arrested by the police. Josh got 2 years probation and had to register as a sex offender. I love my husband, but I have 0 respect for him. I stay for my kids because I don't want them to be raised in a broken home. Any other person in my position would have left him by now.
Danielle, that's hard to watch, right?
It is.
But it's got to be harder to live.
It's very hard to live. It's a challenge every day.
You say it's been going on for 7 years, but you've been married for 6. So that means you knew the nature of this man before you married him.
I did. You know, but we loved each other and we thought that we could work past it.
What made you think that?
You know, when you're in love, you know, you think that anything's possible. And we tried marriage counseling prior to us getting married. Marriage counseling did do well for a little while, but the behavior came back.
And you say you stay because of your children because you don't want your children raised in a broken home.
Yes.
Rather have them with a broken arm?
No. No, and that's why we're trying to get the help for our marriage now, because we had the 2 boys and we're expecting another one. So we want the behavior, we want our marriage to be a healthy, happy marriage before it gets to that point.
Has it ever been a happy marriage?
It was. We have periods of happiness.
Your boys are 4 and 2.
Yes.
And 1 on the way, 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He tells you you're a bad mom and wishes you would have a miscarriage.
My marriage with Danielle is so unhealthy. I can admit that putting hands on my wife is completely inexcusable, but Danielle won't take responsibility for her actions towards me. I can't just snap my fingers and take it all away, and if I could, I would.
Honestly, he has said that so many times that I don't even believe it anymore.
I feel she starts most of our arguments. Danielle never lets up on a fight and never walks away. A fight happened because Danielle insisted that I sue my previous employer for what she thinks is wrongful termination. She ended up on the floor with my hands around her throat.
Honestly, I have a hard time looking at him without feeling hate.
It hurts. I blacked out, and that's all I remember about the incident.
Josh, you guys have been together for 7 years, married 6, together for 7?
Correct.
And you've had a volatile relationship from the start.
More or less, yes.
Okay, and you've gotten help, and it helps at times for a while, and then it kind of reverts back.
Yeah, and we've been in marriage counseling, which helped, but we always tend to fall back on previous behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And you freely admit that you attack her physically.
Yes, I have attacked her physically, and I know that there's no excuse for that, bipolar or not. There's no reason to ever lay my hands on her.
What reason do you give yourself when you do it?
I feel like I'm so enraged. And like I said, I feel like it's almost like I black out and lose control. And I want to get a hold of that so that I don't lay my hands on her, so that that doesn't happen.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Give it to me good. Make sure it counts, because you're going to jail for it. Make sure it counts.
I have it on video either way.
Make sure it counts, because you're going to jail. Go ahead. 7 years. Make sure it counts.
And I'm also telling your probation officer how you try to set the house on fire with a lighter with your family inside that I had to break so you wouldn't do it.
You don't scare me. You're mental idiot. You might miscarriage. You might scare your mother. You don't scare me.
I hope that baby dies.
Doesn't matter, because you won't have any claims to it. Not one single thing to it.
I'll take you down today to file the papers.
Okay, you were threatening to beat her with a belt?
Yes, I had a belt and I was threatening to hit her with it. Again, even me watching that video, it hurts me because I don't want to be that person. I know that's not truly who I am.
Well, you are what you do. You were threatening to beat her with a belt, and then you said, I hope the baby dies.
That was said in anger, and I honestly don't want that baby to die. That's my baby as well, regardless of what happens to us. I love my kids.
Y'all want this to stop before the kids are hurt.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry to tell you, that ship has sailed.
I agree. I agree.
That ship has sailed. Okay. Because this is not something that children just get over. It changes them, and it changes them in a lasting and meaningful way. Danielle and Josh agree that he has a sex addiction that's led not only to him cheating on her with what she says more than 60 people, but resulted with him being charged with soliciting a minor.
Josh has probably cheated on me over 60 times.
I have a sex addiction that gets triggered when we argue. It's not that I want to cheat on her. However, being faithful is something I can't control.
The first time I found Josh was cheating on me, I was 2 days away from giving birth when I discovered the emails. Josh sent to look for hookups. I felt like I had to push my anger aside because I needed him.
Danielle has been unfaithful with me with at least one person that I know of. I've forgiven her for being unfaithful, but trusting is another thing.
I think I cheated out of revenge. The person I cheated with was also giving me emotional support that I was not getting home with Josh.
Danielle and Josh agree that infidelity is partially to blame for destroying the trust in their marriage. I wrote down some key statements that you said. And the first one was, hoping if we fix things, kids won't remember the fighting. I said that ship has sailed because there's a lot of research about children that grow up in the midst of intimate partner violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and there's something called the HPA axis. When children grow up in this, and I don't know that I've seen it as intense as what you two are doing, but it actually changes the anatomy of their brains. It has a cascading effect on the neurotransmitters in the brain, how the brain chemicals talk to each other, and the actual structure of the brain. Specifically, there's dysfunction at different levels of the hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal parts of the brain. That's called the HPA axis, which is involved in the stress response. So they're hypervigilant all the time. Yes, this isn't all you. There's something I call outrageous overshadowing. And outrageous overshadowing is when one person's behavior is so outrageous that it overshadows the behavior of another. And you say and do things that you shouldn't say and do, but your behavior is so outrageous that it overshadows anything she does, so she gets a pass because you're stuffing a rag down her throat. I mean, people kind of don't pay much attention to what she said leading up to that. And you need to start figuring out why you have such poor impulse control, why you have such rage inside, why you have such emotional dysregulation. And whoever is putting you on this medication is not following through to recognize the fact that your behavior's not changing.
Stop trying to rip her stuff, Josh.
He can be a total monster. He was yelling at me so much that spit was coming out of his mouth and hitting my face. It was absolutely disgusting.
I hope that baby dies.
My bipolar disorder causes me to have issues with my impulses, like my sexual desires, my spending habits.
While we were separated, he took $2,000 out of our joint bank account. He's unsure what happened to the money.
When it comes to my anger, I get irritable, agitated, and I know it's coming. I try to warn Danielle, I really do. She needs to take my warnings more seriously.
My mom blames her own behavior, saying that if she would have shut her mouth, he wouldn't have hit her. I tell her that it's not all his disorder. A lot of it is the choices that he's making. There is no excuse for a man hitting a woman.
Well, Josh says he's been on multiple bipolar medications since middle school and goes to regular therapy to try and stop his violent manic episodes. However, he says the only way to fully prevent an episode is to remove himself completely from a toxic situation. Now, you two trigger each other, and there's never any excuse for a man putting his hands on a woman in anger for any reason. I don't care how provocative she is or whatever. There's no excuse for what you're doing. And I'm concerned about both of you when things get physical. I'm concerned about you getting hurt or killed. I'm concerned about you winding up in prison for murder or manslaughter, and these kids being without both of their parents. There's a bad situation no matter how this turns out. And it's clear that this situation right now is so flammable that if the two of you are together in the same room under a roof, unless something changes, it's going to combust. This is going to go up. And, you know, to me, the best analogy I've got is like if your house was on fire and the fire department came by and said, well, let's talk about fire prevention. Well, no, let's talk about firefighting first. Our house is on fire. Could we put that out? And then we can talk about fire prevention. But right now, we need to talk about firefighting. This relationship is on fire. This family is on fire. We need to put out the fire right now. Then we can talk about how to prevent the relationship from burning down in the future. But right now, it's on fire, and these children are in the middle of it.
I didn't ask you nicely.
Their relationship is toxic.
I have a hard time looking at him without feeling hate.
You were threatening to beat her with a belt, and then you said...
I hope that baby dies.
That was said in anger.
You tried to stuff a bleach-soaked rag down her throat?
I did. In a fit of rage, I shoved it in her mouth.
This is a dysfunctional situation. You don't want your children raised in a broken home.
Yes.
Rather have them with a broken arm?
I fear if I leave him, he gets visitation with my kids alone.
This family is on fire. We need to put out the fire. Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.